So we talked about the proof of God, and I said that the next thing that we would talk about is the proof of Jesus. It's really straightforward. The proof of Jesus. First and foremost, everybody believes and agrees the tomb was empty. If the tomb is empty, where's the body? It's the chief claim of Christianity. It's not just that there was a guy named Jesus, which we're going to get to, but that the tomb itself was empty. There's biblical accounts of that. When you say that, people go, well, that's the Bible. You have to recognize that the Bible is a collection of individually written items. So we have multiple accounts of an empty tomb. We have empty tomb accounts from Matthew, Luke, John, and from Paul. We then have confirmation of that by James and Jude and Peter. So that's 7 people who individually write that there's an empty tomb that are in the biblical accounts. Again, 7 individuals who wrote that. Then we have confirmation of that. There's that the tomb is empty by Pliny the Younger or contemporaries like Tacitus and Josephus who write about these things. Non-Christians, actually Josephus is a Jew and he mocks Christians. And then there's the historical writings from the Talmud, which is put together about 300 years later, which all say that even those guys have records that the tomb was empty. So the question becomes, why was the tomb empty? It's not the tomb isn't empty. The tomb's empty. So why? Well, Christians claim it's because he rose from the dead. Why should you believe that the tomb's empty? Because of all of the appearances that there are. Again, multiple accounts from varying individuals saying both Christian, so biblical sources. Again, reminder, these are individual accounts later collected into one collection, okay? Like if I'm investigating a crime, I'm going to collect a bunch of individual accounts and put those together into one case. That's essentially what the Bible is. It's a case, okay? So all of these appearances, right? That would be Paul talking about the appearances or Luke talking about the appearances. 500 people at one time, and all of these people seeing them, okay? Because skeptics were transformed. Paul was a guy who went against Christians. He was a Pharisee, a leader in the synagogue, yet he could go and he could say, hey, I've now encountered this Jesus, so I'm now no longer part of this ruling class of people where I have lots of money. I'm now going to be maligned and persecuted and probably put to death. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense for a guy like Paul to suddenly change teams to a team where he's actively putting people in jail. People are actively being stoned to death. People are actively being put to death for their professions. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to join that team. Doesn't make any sense unless he met Jesus. Those are just 3. How about just the transformation of the church, the tremendous growth that it had in the first century? How is it that we have a claim of a guy who lived, died on a cross, and then rose again through resurrection, that he's seen by all these people, and within the lifetime, it spreads everywhere? Well, it's too close for it to be a legend. That would be if like somebody came to you and was like, Ronald Reagan rose from the dead. We're like, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. Like, if people were like, yeah, Ronald Reagan got shot, we're like, yeah, he got shot. Yeah, you're right. We remember that. Yeah. So within 40 years even of Jesus' death, like right now from Ronald Reagan, we can We can have certainty about certain things. It's too close for there to be legends formed, right? The same is true for like JFK, right? It's too close for there to have been legends formed. So that's part of why we can trust that there's this growth. There's all of these people who have witnessed these things. They're confirmed by other witnesses, and that causes this amazing growth, even though there's tremendous persecution going on. It's like, well, why should you believe this? You're going to be attacked. It's because all these people say it's true and they were there. The early accounts. That's the next one. The early accounts. I've already highlighted several writers just from within the lifetime, just within like the first 40 years of Jesus' life. Okay? Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Paul, James, Jude, and Peter. 8 men all wrote accounts of Jesus within the first 40-ish years of his life. That's more writers than there were for Julius Caesar within 100 years of his life. That's more writers than Caesar Augustus than in his first 100 years of his life. That's more writers than Nero, the guy who was a freaking psychopath. Like, who's more interesting to write about? The amazing leader or the complete and total psychopath? Everybody wants to know about Dahmer. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about Jocko. Unless you're a Jocko fan. But nobody's like, they're not doing Netflix documentaries of Jocko Willink. You know what I mean? Those are just the biblical writers. Now let's talk about the other writers. We already mentioned their names. Tacitus, Josephus, Pliny the Younger. These are all people who've written accounts of Jesus or about Jesus and Christians. It's not just like biblical writers. I don't have to just rely on this one group. Like, I think people get it twisted when we say that we have faith in something and they just go, well, you just believe what the Bible says. Well, I do believe what the Bible says. That's true. But I don't just go wholehearted like, oh, I believe whatever the Bible says for no reason. Believing that Jesus is who he says he is comes from those things. But the next thing too is that I can test him from previous things. He can self-validate. And you're saying, well, how do you self-validate? Well, you can self-validate in a couple of different ways. But what if there's a writing? What if there's a prediction that comes 400 or 500 years before, and it says to the day when something is going to happen, and before that thing happens, almost to the day, I'm confused on that one, there's a claim of the appearance of this person. And what if I said, hey, in 470 years, every single building in Washington, D.C. is going to get thrown over. It'll be completely destroyed. There won't be any portion of the building left in its spot in 470 years from today. Well, if that happened, and I was right about that, that would be a wild prediction to make, and I would be insane if I was correct. Well, that's exactly what happens in the book of Daniel. There's this guy, Daniel. He is a prophet of God. He lives in Babylon during the exile of the Jews under Nebuchadnezzar, and he writes an account and says, hey, in 400 and whatever years, the temple in Jerusalem is going to be completely torn down. And you're like, well, that's weird, because there's not really, like, that's a weird prediction. And he goes, oh, and by the way, before that happens, the Messiah is going to come. Well, we know when the temple was overthrown. It was overthrown in 70 AD. It was completely destroyed. Completely destroyed. Which is super impressive because even leading up to that time, you have the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, where Rome did not allow war. They did peace through, or strength through peace is kind of the idea, is what they did, is they're like, we're not having war. You want war, we're going to completely destroy you. Well, that's what the Jews do. They fight, and then what happens? They completely destroy the temple. And not one stone is left there. So we know, we can trust what Daniel says because he's right to the day when this is going to happen. So where is this Messiah figure? Again, before Jesus comes, we have this prediction of the suffering servant from Isaiah, from 600 years before he comes, of this guy who's going to be crucified, and crucifixion doesn't even exist yet. So Jesus self-validates. He doesn't come to you and say, look, I wrote this thing about me. Hey, look, that nobody's seen this before. No, these are existing writings. It's not like I could walk in and be like, hey, I'm going to get crucified next week, and then I'm going to raise in 3 days. I can't force someone to crucify me, because that's the other part about Jesus. It's not like he commits murder and gets himself a capital punishment. Jesus commits no crime and predicts that he will be crucified. Jesus's trial is illegal. If you learn about how Jewish law is established, the trial itself that was brought against Jesus was illegal, and there's no evidence to convict him. The number of things that have to go right for Jesus to be crucified as an innocent person is unbelievable. And yet he is crucified. Again, everybody agrees this guy's crucified. The thing is Jesus said he would be crucified. And then he said he would be risen in 3 days. You likely believe that the 300 of Thermopylae are real. I don't know why. You don't really have any evidence to believe that. Herodotus, the first guy who writes about it, is a known liar. But you believe in the 300. You likely trust everything that you read about Julius Caesar from when he was emperor. And there are fewer writers, and they're all Roman writers, about Julius Caesar. But you don't believe Jesus lived, died on a cross, and rose from the dead 3 days later, even though there's a whole bunch of people, Jew, non-Jew, Roman, who agree he lived and died and the tomb was empty, that all their predictions are correct. I mean, at some point you have to choose to not want to believe something, to not believe in Jesus. If I point to the sun and I say that's the sun, you go, nah, that's not the sun. Then you've chosen to not believe it, even though the proof is right there. The same is true for Jesus. There is more certainty in Jesus than there is in just about anything else from antiquity. There's significantly more trust in Jesus than there can be for anything else in antiquity. That's how confident we are. The proof of Jesus is real. It's whether or not you want to believe it.